John Heilemann, for President Biden to sort of cross the Rubicon and call it a genocide was a big deal. It happened at the same time as, I'm not going to describe it as causal, news of more and better and bigger weapons going to Ukraine. It seems that we are also entering a new phase of the war.
I think we are, and I think, you know, it's been, there was like a moment there, you know, for a week or so. It was kind of clear there had this sense that possibly that, you know, maybe Russia was going to back off in some way and retreat. And now this kind of this moment of what seems like it's going to be devastating violence and this kind of hardcore ground warfare in the East, you know, kind of, you know, as it's created a context in which there must be a response to it. And given that that response on the military side is required by what seems to be looming in the future, you then set that against the mounting evidence, not just of war crimes, but you have Zelensky coming out a week ago now and saying that genocide was there. So it's kind of like the two things are I'm not sure that the evidence of genocide may have well existed regardless of what was happening on the military side. And if that military side wasn't about to amp up, we may have been able to delay that discussion. But it seems like the two of them kind of setting side by side has forced a kind of linkage in that area. Once you start calling things war crimes, and once you particularly start calling them genocide, the argument for not increasing in some substantial way your degree of commitment to the cause and arms and assistance and more, it would be very hard to do that, you know, for Biden, I think. And I think he may have wanted to hold that off for longer if it weren't for the fact that the arms are in fact necessary and urgent, and that we're going to do that no matter what.
Yeah, and I want to be careful not to link any of these things as careful as John just was. The other thing that's happening at the same time, Jack, is that the goal is now very publicly stated for Ukraine to win and Russia to lose. And it's stated all the time. I heard it here first from Ambassador Bill Taylor last week, former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, that the only way out is through, and the only way through is victory. Having been there, what does that look like in your view?
I mean, I'm always skeptical to declare any party in an armed conflict a victor in it. And I think that whatever happens in this war, there are a tremendous amount of people in Ukraine and in Russia, far more in Ukraine, of course, who have lost enormous amounts in this war. So what does victory look like for the Ukrainians? It could take several forms. It could take the cessation of immediate hostilities in their borders. It could take the redrawing of new borders, that they come to a negotiated peace settlement with the Russians there. You know, obviously that is something that the Ukrainians kind of fundamentally are against, but that might be what it takes to at least bring some kind of halt to the violence. I think we can conclusively say sort of at this point that Russia has not been able to accomplish many of the military objectives that it set out in accomplishing. And now, you know, winners and losers is really only going to be determined by who survives and who doesn't.
And the reality and perception is also pretty distorted, Jack. I mean, Putin has suffered military setback after military setback on the battlefield in Ukraine, full stop. It's beyond dispute. Putin's troops are carrying out war crimes that Joe Biden has described and Zelensky has described as a genocide. And inside Russia, there's a whole lot of support for everything that's going on. The disinformation seems to have held. How does that complicate things for President Zelensky?
I think for President Zelensky, he's sort of always operated under the assumption that there wasn't going to be any kind of sort of domestic upheaval or revolution in Russia. This is something that I've heard Ukrainians speak with a tremendous amount of frustration about. There's a very real sense in that country that, like, when they have had bad leaders that they didn't like, they overthrew them. And there's a frustration and an anger at the Russian people as well for not being able to do that to Vladimir Putin. The situations and the circumstances in these two countries are completely different. I think from an outsider's top-down perspective, these aren't exactly one-to-one comparisons. The hold that Vladimir Putin has over power domestically in Russia is drastically different than what we've seen from leaders in many other countries that have been in similar situations. I don't necessarily think the Russian people should be blamed for that, but I think I don't see an end to this war where Putin is out of power. I think he's doing everything he can inside the country through propaganda and through, just pushing back against every narrative that we've seen and evidence that we've seen coming from journalists and investigators that he can, simply to retain power.
And Jack has a great piece about how difficult it is to hold someone like Vladimir Putin accountable for war crimes playing to the eye. He writes this, it's absolutely infuriating. On a personal level, it makes me angry that Simon Ostrovsky, a special correspondent for PBS NewsHour, who was part of the first wave of journalists into Bucha earlier this month, saying, quote, it's not easy to do what we did and what we've been doing over the last week, looking at these dead bodies, people who suffered incredibly before they died, and to hear the perpetrators gaslighting the whole world and their own people, and not just denying what they did, but laying it at the feet of the victims. It's next level gaslighting, and we saved that for the hijinks of one of the two parties in this country, but it's everything that has happened in the last several days led Joe Biden to do what he did, to say it's a genocide. It's the elimination of a people.
I mean, look, I mean, there have been lots of debates about Joe Biden, how Joe Biden has sometimes spoken about in this conflict. Many people were upset about the things that he said. We talked about this when he gave the speech in Poland and suggested that Putin had to go. On the other hand, I keep coming back to the reality that whether it was George W. Bush who looked into Vladimir Putin's eyes and saw his soul, or whether it was Barack Obama, or whether it was Donald Trump. In the most extreme cases, for those years, from the time Vladimir Putin came to power until now, there's not been an American president who spoke with moral clarity about what was going on. There was a refusal in many cases, and a willful refusal to call a spade and say what was going on. And we saw Vladimir Putin, people who are familiar with the region, have reported in the region, reported on previous Russian conflicts, would say over and over again when this started, he has committed war crimes before. There are multiple cases of it. We watched it happen. Even if we didn't call those things war crimes, they were war crimes. They were clear. Anyone who was there knew they were clear, whether that was in Syria or whether it was in Grozny, other places. So I think to have Joe Biden, one of the things about Joe Biden is that he has decided that in this case, there's not enough. There may be some upsides to diplomatese, and that there may be the foreign policy establishment doesn't like it when he does these things. And probably some people in his own administration don't like it. But I think he just recognized that there's been a huge cost for not having that kind of moral clarity in the past. There may be a cost to having the clarity too, but the cost that we've paid for not having it is evident now. It has been the thing that clearly encouraged Putin to do what he's done in this case. He thought he could get away with what he's now doing. And I do think to come back to Jack's question, your question about victory, the other thing I think it does is, in addition to once you've declared something a genocide, you need to be more all in on aid and assistance and military and providing arms and so on. But it also makes this question of victory. The notion a few weeks ago that we would leave an off-ramp for Putin. We must leave an off-ramp for Putin. There'll be a negotiated settlement. He'll have some land. He'll get neutrality out of Ukraine, whatever. Those things become much more difficult to tolerate for anybody to swallow in the international community, for Ukrainians, for anybody to let Vladimir Putin have a negotiated out now once the world, and in this case, Zelensky and the leader of the Western Alliance, have declared genocide. Much harder to do. Is it still possible? It's possible. But man, the degree of difficulty to not seek just we, meaning the Ukrainians, must drive Russia out of Ukraine and have something that there will always be this cost for the Ukrainians who died and for the Ukrainian society. But that victory, at least on the battlefield, must be clear now, because to give Putin a negotiated settlement once he's committed genocide is very hard to stomach. Yeah.